Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
The algorithms of the internet occasionally get one right and suggested this story to me. Now, here's the problem. No one sent this to me, not a single person. But the internet said, Steve, here's a story you should know about. From The Guardian, headline, book borrowed from Finnish library in 1939, returned 84 years late. 84 years late. I've mentioned before, I am of Finnish descent. All of my ancestors can be traced back to Finland. Occasionally there's things on the set that reference Finland. Even the thumbnail, the logo of my channel has a reference to Finland. So this story is about a copy of Arthur Conan Doyle's Refugees was due to be returned to Helsinki's Central Library back around the time that the USSR invaded Finland. And that might play a part in this story. A book borrowed from the Helsinki Library has been returned 84 years overdue. Finnish translation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's historical novel Refugees was received by the librarian on Monday at the main desk at the Helsinki Central Library. The due date of the loan was December 26, 1939, adding that she had never received a book so long overdue. That's the librarian speaking. The relationship between the person who returned the book and the original borrower is unknown. We don't think it's the same person. Librarians said usually these kinds of loans returned decades after the due date are books found when people go through deceased relatives' belongings. So a lot of times books are stamped property of, and you should know that once in a while books are disposed of by libraries, meaning they've got too many books or outdated books, they replace books, and they often sell the old ones as part of a fundraiser. So I have in my personal collection probably dozens of books that are stamped property of this library, and then it's re-stamped saying, been sold by this library, no longer property of. So people going through my stuff won't have that problem, I hope. People want to do the right thing and return the book that is the library's property. I think that is lovely, she added. A likely explanation for the delay is that the due date fell 1 month after the Soviet Union's invasion of Finland back in November of 1939. The return of the book might not have been the first thing on the borrower's mind when the due date approached. The winter war between Finland and the Soviet Union raged between the neighboring countries until March of 1940, when they signed a treaty. It did force Finland to make significant land cessions, and then there was a continuation war later on. If the person survived the war, they probably had other things in their mind than returning the book, she said. The book is a historical novel published in 1893 and set in 17th century France, written by the British author best known for his stories about Sherlock Holmes. According to the librarian, the library may make the book available to the public again since it was received in such good condition. Even though it was published in 1925, the librarian points out that the quality of old books is usually much better than the new ones. So I mentioned I've got a soft spot in my heart for librarians, and I do for a couple reasons, one of which is my mother was a librarian. She passed away a couple years ago, but if you'd asked her in her later years, what did you do? She'd say, I was a librarian. She'd actually say, I am a librarian. She'd make it present tense because she loved being a librarian. And she actually volunteered many, many years after she retired to run the library of a very, very small association that she was a part of. So she was a librarian for many, many years. And a couple years back, one of the books I wrote was named a Michigan Notable Book by the Library of Michigan. And they've got this shindig they put on in Lansing to give you the award. And they invite a bunch of other people out there and other authors who've gotten the award and so on and so forth. They have hors d'oeuvres. And my mom and dad came out to that, and they got to see me up on stage getting an award. And the librarian of Michigan is a guy named Randy Riley, really nice guy. I've known the guy for a while. And so before the ceremony, I told him, I said, when my parents get here, my mother, she's retired now, but she's a librarian for many, many years. I'd love for you to meet her. He said, I'd love to meet her. And so later on, my parents show up. I flag Randy down and say, Randy, it's my mother. Mom, this is Randy Riley. He's the librarian of Michigan. The two sat there and talked about libraries and books for a while in their own language because, people in different professions can do that. And so that was pretty cool for her. And the Library of Michigan is a great organization. I've done research out there. They got an amazing archive, for instance. But interestingly, my ancestry and all that going back to Finland is now known for having extremely high literacy rates and also having a very, very good educational system. Now, whether the good libraries are part of that or chicken and the egg kind of thing, I don't know. But it doesn't surprise me that there are great libraries in Finland. And, this story of this book probably is more interesting than we think it is, where it's wandered in the last 84 years, because it probably didn't just sit on one shelf the entire time. But I remember when I was a little kid, and I don't know if I was kindergarten or first grade, but I remember when I was a little kid and the teacher taking us down to the library and saying, today we're going to learn about the library. And so we all sit down and the teacher turns it over to the librarian, who comes out and says, let me explain to you how the library works. This room is filled with books on all kinds of topics. You name a topic, we got a book on it. And if you peruse around and find a book you want to read, you can take it home, take it with you, sign it out, and have it for a week. And then you bring it back. No charge. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, is that a dumb business model. Didn't say it quite like that in my mind, but what? Somebody buys these books and then lends them to us at no charge to us? But of course, libraries are extremely important things, both for children in schools, but also for adults. And, I've spoken at a lot of places about the topics of the books I've written. One of the places I speak at the most is simply libraries. And so I'll speak at a library in Berrien Springs or Detour, Michigan, or Calumet, Michigan, or Monroe. I've spoken at libraries all over the state. And one of the most fascinating things to me is you can have a tiny little town someplace, Coopersville, tiny little town, and they've got a library. And when I go to the library to speak, quite often it's the first time I've ever been in that library. Sometimes it's the first time I've ever been to that town. Libraries are often the centers of the community. And you can tell that a lot of stuff is happening at the library. And, I show up and I speak one night, I come and go, and, but I'll see what's coming up in the upcoming weeks. And it's all kinds of stuff. But then they also have like classes, people get together and do stuff, book clubs. And so libraries are extremely important, especially in smaller communities. Thinking back to the library when I was a little kid, which is more than half a century ago, okay? I can actually right now think of the titles of the books I read back then. First grade, second grade, third grade. I can actually think of the titles and the books that I read back then because that's how important they were to me. And these are books I checked out of the library, I read them, and I brought them back. Probably had the book for a week. May have checked one book out twice because I liked it that much. But the point is that that's the lasting impression and how long it stuck with me over all these years. It's absolutely amazing to think that after all these years, I can remember the books, the titles, what they were about, what I learned from reading them. And so, I learned a lot of stuff in school, in classrooms and so on. But if you said, Steve, quick, name for me, the classes you took in third grade, I could guess them, but I don't know. But what books did you read? Oh, I can tell you. And so I've always been what they call an avid reader. I'm always reading books. Right now I'm reading a book. And so if you ever join me on my live streams on Sundays, 1 to 3 o'clock Eastern time, I do live streams. And I take questions from the audience and answer questions. And anybody can always ask, Steve, what book are you reading right now? And I get that one a lot. And so I'll tell you. And I'll say, here's the book I'm reading right now. Because I read probably 20 to 30 books a year. And so that all started with me at the library when I was a little kid going, wait, I get to check books out for free? And I seem to recall that the overdue fine was 5 cents a day. Does that sound right? 5 cents a day? And so I don't know what 84 years of that would add up to. Somebody could do the math, but it'd probably take some time. Unless you had access to a calculator. But it's a fascinating story. And I do think there's something interesting here because obviously, if you wanted to, you found a book that's been checked out of a library 84 years ago. And you realize that the library's written that book off a long time ago. The libraries have books disappear all the time. The person who found it could have said, it's an 84-year-old book. The library's written this one off. They could have tossed it. But instead, they brought it back to the library and said, here, this belongs here. And so I really salute the people who did that. And I also like the sense of humor of the librarian who says, hey, here you go. We might put it right back in circulation because they don't make them like they used to. So it's a great story. So glad The Guardian published it and that the internet suggested it to me. Book borrowed from Finnish library, 1939, returned 84 years late. Questions or comments, put them below those. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Don't do anything you don't want to see splashed in the headlines tomorrow.